Hello everybody, I'm Nick, and in this video I'm going to show you how we can create a REST API SDK for our API in ASP.NET Core. First, let's answer the question, what is an SDK for the API? Well, an SDK is really a way for our users to programmatically interact with our API. So normally you would go on a website and you would enter all the necessary URLs and all that to actually call the API you want to call. However, in a programmatic way, you need a standardized way to just interact with your API. So what I would have here, for example, if I were to use it, is something like tweetbook API.login async. And then I would have a login request, so new login request, and I would be able to log in programmatically. So imagine as if another system is calling our system through code. So it's a good idea whenever you make an API like that to provide this SDK, because you know how people can easily integrate with your API. For this endeavor, I will use a project called Refit. You'll find a link on it on the GitHub page on the description. Make sure you leave a star. It's a brilliant project, and we'll see what it is, what it does, and why it's amazing. For this to work, we need to make a few changes. We need to create a few other projects. So first and foremost, I'm going to go ahead and create a new project, and I'm going to make a class library called tweetbook.sdk, and this will be the SDK that we're going to be providing. So let's create that and delete the class class in here. We will also create another project called tweetbook.sdk.sample, and from this library, that's going to be a console app. From this library, we're going to actually demonstrate how this SDK works. So I'm going to run the API and use that sample to show you how it works. So let's create that and delete. Actually, don't delete this program, we're going to need it. And last but not least, we are going to create another library, and this library is going to be named tweetbook.contracts. Now, why do we need the contracts as a package? It's a very good idea to actually have these contracts here, your API contracts, as a separate NuGet package or project altogether, which can be shared across many projects and many other services. And that's a good idea because you don't have to duplicate this code. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut here the v1 and I'm going to paste it into the contract project. And I don't need to change any namespace here, and that is because the namespace is still the same. We're just going to delete these contracts. However, Rider doesn't really like the fact that I just moved this to another project and it's going to show some false positives regarding those assemblies. So I'm going to restart Rider and this will be fixed. And now with Rider restarted, I'm actually going to be able to just add this contracts package as I should, and also add this missing required package from the contracts project. So we don't need this domain using thing, but we do need this data annotations package. So I'm going to use NuGet to refer to the project, and this, let me just remove prelis, and we are going to use this system component model.annotations and just refer to it. And now this error goes away. So our project builds normally just like before. So now with that out of the way, let's go into our SDK project. And our SDK project will also need our contracts project. So I'm going to refer to it. And I'm going to make two things, two interfaces. The first one will be called iIdentity API. And the other one will be called iToItBook API. But I'm not going to create any class that implements those interfaces. Instead, I'm going to add a package. And the package I'm going to add is called Refit, as I said before, link in the description. Going to add the latest version. And why is this package so amazing? Well, what if I told you that you can actually have an interface that automatically creates its own implementation? That would be awesome. And this is exactly what Refit does. Refit, just with attributes and a few interface methods, can generate everything for us. Let me just give you an example. Let's say I want to create something that I can call the identity controller, which is my identity API. I'm going to go in the identity API interface in the SDK, and I'm going to say I want a post endpoint, and this post is coming from Refit, and I'm going to put the URL here, and the URL is API v1 identity.register, and I'm going to say task API response. This is coming from Refit again, auth success response, and the name is register async, and then body attribute. Again, this is coming from Refit, user registration request, and just say registration request here, and that's it. This is enough for Refit to create a register method for us. I'm going to show you in the sample project how this all hangs together. I'm going to go ahead and add the other two methods that the identity API controller has, that is login. And I'm going to use the user login request and rename this to login request. And last but not least, I'm going to make a refresh one. So refresh, and refresh token request. And this is exactly everything we need to have the identity API code. Let's hop onto the sample project and explain how this works, and let's see how this actually works. So I'm gonna change this to async task because I need to await those methods. And I'm gonna say var identity API equals REST service. And of course I need to refer to that other SDK package. So let me do that and say REST service coming from Refit. I'm gonna say for which service I'm running this for. And this is the identity API interface. And in here, I'm gonna use the host URL. So local host 5001, this is where my API runs. And this will generate the implementation for this API. And let me show you what I mean. Let's say register response here equals await identity API register async, and we are going to register here. So I'm gonna make a new request with email sdkaccount@gmail.com, which is totally fake, and password equals test1234 exclamation mark, and then also make a login equivalent. So login response, login async, and then user login request. Again, I have absolutely no implementation that I wrote for this identity API. However, I want to run the API in the background. So this is now running, as you can see in here in the console, and I can actually show you here as well. This is actually running. Before I can debug this, I made a small mistake. This needs to start with /. So let me just go ahead and do that. And now go back to the program, and I'm going to say debug this application, right click debug. And now we're breaking here. So if I step over this, you can see that I have an identity API, an auto-generated identity API class, which I did not wrote. Refit did all that for me. And let's see if it works. So step over the register response. The account did not exist in the database. And now you can see in here that I have a refresh token and a token which I can use. So if I click view, you can see this token, and I can copy this and use it in the application. And then if I use the same account I just created to login, you can see here, if I expand this, that this is also success and I get another token. So now we have access to the API through code without even having to write the class that does those actions. And in here in the console, you can actually see my application running and doing those things. This is awesome. So let's go ahead and see what happens if I want to add the post controller in there, where we create some stuff and we delete some stuff and we edit some stuff. So I'm going to go to the iTweetbook API and I'm going to start adding those methods. First, I need a get, and the endpoint is API v1 posts, and this is a task of API response of list of post response. So it returns all the posts, so get all async, and it has no parameters. Then I need, let me just copy this because I'm lazy. I need to get a specific post, so I'm using this template squiggly brackets post ID, and I'm going to change this to get async because I'm only getting one, and this isn't a list anymore, it's a single post response. And I'm going to say GUID post ID, and Refit is smart enough to pattern match this with this, so I don't need to say anything like from root or from body. And then I'm going to add the create method, so post, and it's again API v1 posts, and I need a task that returns, I could just copy this from here to be honest. And the task that returns an API response of post response, which is create async. And here I have the body attribute, and I'm gonna say create post request, which is again create post request. And let me just create that for update and delete as well. So update actually needs the post ID in the root. So I'm gonna copy this, and I'm gonna copy this, and I'm going to change the update post request here, and also rename this to update async. And then last but not least, the delete method. And of course, this is a put, and this is a delete. And this is another thing that needs the post ID, but it doesn't actually need the body, so I can replace this. So, in fact, I can change this to string because I don't return the body. So this is enough for me to access the API. However, these endpoints also have authentication. So Refit takes care of that as well. I can actually say headers here, not headers. Yep. And in here I specify the type of authorization. So I'm saying I want the authorization header with the bearer scheme. Note here how I don't have a token in this part. That's because I'm going to add the token in a second. But this is all we need to have a Tweetbook API. So I'm going to go back to the program now, and I'm going to create one here. So I'm going to say Tweetbook API, and this is the iTweetbook API. Now with that in place, we're ready to start implementing every method of the Tweetbook API and showing you how we can actually call everything from create to get to update to delete from C# code while calling the API behind the scenes. Before I can actually show you this, if you can see here, I added this authorization bearer for a reason, and that's because we need to be authorized to actually access this even from code. And Refit has a nice solution for that. If you go in the Refit settings here, there is a property called Authorization Header Value Getter. I know it's a bit of a weird name, but all this really is a delegate that returns a string, well, really a task that returns a string, which is then used and put in the authorization header. So what I want to do here is I want to have a var cached token equals string.empty, and I'm going to return that cached token here, and I'm going to set this cached token in the login response .content.token here. All this really does is just sets the rest of the header for my call. So it's going to be authorization bearer, and then this token, which is retrieved by the login response. Normally, in a real system, you would want to check if this token is invalid, and if it is, call the login service again to update it and set it again on every call. I'm not going to show you that. There's plenty of documentation on that, and the video is long enough, so I'm going to skip this part. And I'm also going to skip reusing the same HTTP client for these REST services, but both of them should actually be using the same HTTP client, because that is the best practice. So with that out of the way, let's go ahead and just see what we can actually do now with this thing. First and foremost, I'm going to get all the posts. So all posts equals await. And I've gotten comments before saying I'm going too fast. YouTube has this functionality that you can actually slow down or speed up the video if you want to. So if you think I'm running too fast on a specific thing for you, just slow it down or replay it as many times as you need. I don't think I'm skipping over anything. I might be fast in some cases, so sorry for that. So now we get all the posts here. I'm gonna say created post equals await tweetbook API.create async, and I'm gonna create a new post, and the name of this post will be this is created by the SDK. Nice name. And then in tags I'm gonna put just SDK. Then I'm gonna say retrieved post, so tweetbook API.get, and I'm gonna get this post I just created, so I'm gonna use the response object from the created post.content.id, and I'm gonna get that back. Then I'm going to update this post, so I'm updated post equals await tweetbook update async, and then I need the created post ID and also an updated post request, and this is updated by the SDK. And last but not least, I'm going to delete it inevitably, so await tweetbook API delete async, and that just needs the ID, so content.id. And these are all the actions of our post controller. I could also add the tag controller methods there, but you can do that to practice. So with that out of the way, I'm gonna go ahead and run the tweetbook API behind the scenes, and I'm gonna show you on every step of the way what this looks like. So as you can see, this is running now. I'm not authenticated or authorized, so if I execute this, 401, but now I can debug through this sample project. And F10, the register will fail inevitably because the account already exists, but the login should succeed, so I'll be able to get the token from here. As you can see, that's the JWT token, and I could use it now in the running API. So say authorize and run. I can get all the posts, nothing SDK related, as you can see here. So I'm moving it here. We're setting the cache token here, and now I should be able to get all the posts in code. As you can see, the content is those 4 posts that I had in the API. And I'm gonna create this new one. So created post, as you can see, it's very fast. It's all local. Response is fine. Everything is here. And if I go back into my Swagger UI and press execute, the SDK post is now created here, as you can see. Now I can retrieve it again in code, and sure enough, it is here, everything populated. I'm gonna say update this, and the update was successful. Again, if I execute this now, this says this is updated by the SDK, so it all works fine. And let's just delete it, and yeah, the status code is the correct one. So if I execute this, it's no longer here. So everything to interact with our API just by having a few attributes and an interface. This is insane. It makes it so easy to write C# SDKs, and I encourage you to go ahead, just take a look to Refit, give it a star in GitHub and just make your own SDKs with it. It's amazing. That's all I had for today. Thanks for watching. Leave a like if you like this video, subscribe for more content like this, and I'll see you in the next video. Keep coding.